When you dare to share, you break the silence. When you dare to share, you speak your truth. When you dare to share, you use the full strength of your voice. When you dare to share, it brings opportunity to own your story. So tell it, be heard, and at the same time, your sharing is someone else's learning, inspiration, motivation, empowerment, and hope. There's always an element to each of our stories that remains a secret. For some, we feel it's a dirty little secret. Dare to share your untold story exposes these secrets in a welcoming and positive way. I encourage each of you out there to dare yourself to share what is yours to tell. When we dare, it is the courage to do something really important. Let this be a vow to each and every single one of us that we take risk, we brave, confront, and face what is, while inspiring and empowering all communities. So let's break that silence and tap into mental beauty. This is Salima Jadabji, your podcast host, a practicing social worker, and your mental wellness connoisseur. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast, episode number 51. What she did to thrive and excel in a male-dominated field. To all my fellow listeners, before we get started, I'm just dropping in a note to give you a heads up that this podcast might be emotionally triggering for you. We do invite guests onto the show who share openly about extremely difficult life moments with exposure and impact of what the struggles have been like. The intensity of each episode could have a variable impact on your emotional and mental well-being based on your own personal story. If at any point the topic becomes uncomfortable or upsetting to you in any way, please do not pressure yourself to listen. Instead, be kind to yourself, do some self-care, and perhaps give another episode a try. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our courageous and daring guest, Shirley Brooks. Shirley is a mother, wife, mindset coach, and business strategist for introverts and multi-passionate women who need help to come out of their shells and boost their confidence and monetize their unique genius. Shirley comes from 20 plus years of experience in the logistics and supply chain industry and decided to stop blaming herself for her discontentment in her career and took the steps to become an active co-creator of the life she has stepped into. Her goal is to empower women and outfit them with tools they need to succeed and make the impact that they desire. She believes the skills which are learned in the corporate environment, combined with natural talent, lived experience, passions, and abilities, perfectly set the tone for women to take back their power so women no longer feel they need to adapt to places like male-dominant industries. Shirley aims to create massive impact by increasing female human potential and family quality of life at home by creating a global community of 10,000 independently wealthy, intentional, and holistically healthy women-owned and operated brands. Well, hello, Shirley. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast.
Hello. That intro was amazing. I'm like, I think I like her. I want to.
It's all you. This is your life's work.
Right. She sounds like she's doing things.
Yeah, you're doing
right,
things.
That was me. Yeah.
It's you. Exactly. Well, I'm glad that you like your truth. This
Yeah.
is good. Oh my goodness. Wow. I'm thrilled, Shirley, to have you on the show today. And I am certainly grateful for your willingness to tell your story today. It feels really encouraging when I am met with guests like yourself who allow me to draw the strength and support and inspiration from the stories that are shared here. You know, it's so important that we take a stance together to help break barriers of mental stigma.
I totally agree. And you do have a way. You definitely have a way of helping us draw that story out. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Well, Shirley, in case you're still wondering, the podcast here, it's all about bringing forward those untold stories that people go through, whether it's directly about a mental health struggle or something else. And something that we know here is that no matter what the story is about, there is impact on one's own mental health in some way, which remains, unseen, tucked away. And so this platform serves in a way to break down these barriers of mental stigma that have been conditioned in our society. So it's my hopeful mission that it's for you and I to stand tall and encourage people to share and tell. So, like leading by example and encouraging people to share and tell what individuals typically do have reservation for expressing. And so I'm bringing forward this trend, and it's called the mental beauty rethink. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear about that? The mental beauty rethink.
I think it sounds amazing. One of my loves, besides being a coach, is makeup. So when I hear mental beauty rethink, I think of all the things like how we're in this space where we're actually rethinking beauty on the outside too, right? Like beauty's
Mm-hmm.
not just a certain skin tone anymore. Beauty's not just a certain body type
Mm-hmm.
anymore. Beauty is not covered as much anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone wants their
Mm-hmm.
natural, authentic self to shine through. But in order to do that in terms of mental beauty, you have to let those
Mm-hmm.
stories, that natural you, like who you really are at your core, shine through
Mm-hmm.
as well. So it's not just
Mm-hmm.
an outside thing, it's an inside thing. And being able to
Mm.
share that inner beauty creates inspiration. Just like when you look at a beautiful picture, a beautiful person, your story is an inspiration to somebody else.
Absolutely. So great to hear your thoughts on it. I'm just going to take that in. Really like how you said, it's not an outside thing, it's an inside thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the authentic, natural you shining through.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. I haven't had anyone give me that perspective before. This is so fascinating.
Oh,
Really
yeah.
fascinating. Yeah.
Authenticity is a big deal for me.
Huge,
Mhm.
huge. Absolutely. Well, shall we get started? I am really excited and ready to uncover all parts of your story today.
Well, let's go.
Okay, okay. All right, here we go. Shirley, give us the newspaper headline of how you would title your untold story. What would it say?
Okay. I think it would say, if you can't use your voice, it will show up in your body.
If you can't use your voice, then it will show up in your body.
Yeah.
Hmm. Can you say a little more? I'm a little intrigued here.
So if you can't use your voice, it will show up in your body. When you suppress your voice, suppress the things that stress you out, when you kind of ignore those things around you that are creating trauma and triggers for you, and you just keep on going, la la la, like it's nothing's happening, it can show up in your body. If you don't express it, don't get it out, don't address it, it can show up
Mm-hmm.
in your body in the form of pain and
Mm-hmm.
disease and things like that.
Mm-hmm. All kinds of manifestations.
Hmm. Hmm.
Wow. All right. Well, then, without further ado, tell us what your untold story is all about. Give us the skinny.
Let's see, where do I begin?
Yeah.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
let's start with, like you said, I've been in what I would consider a pretty male dominated industry for 20 plus years. It's the logistics industry. And
Mm-hmm.
it definitely, like Melinda French Gates said, is a place that was designed for our dads, not for us,
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And as a woman maneuvering that space, you encounter things that you don't even realize are happening. All you know is you're in this space,
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to excel, you're competing with obviously men. But like I said, the space is set up for them. You do all the things, you work all the long hours, you attend all the meetings, you miss out on a lot at home that you would want to be a part of, but you're doing
Mm-hmm.
everything you can to kind of be like that 110 percenter, because you want to
Mm-hmm.
be seen as worthy of this position, and I can match,
Mm-hmm.
this man doesn't deserve more than me, we're equals.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's not even that he doesn't deserve as much as I deserve. But in all of the hustle and bustle and doing all the things to try to be competitive, you lose a part of that. You lose a part of yourself. You lose a part of your femininity, even, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you endure things because it's the thing to do in that space. Like you endure the stresses and the
Mm-hmm.
sometimes disrespect because you're a woman going into a male space and you're in a leadership role and you shouldn't be in this space. And I'll respect you in a different way than I'll
Mm-hmm.
respect one of my peers who's just, a man just like I am. And you have to clench your teeth and you can't say certain things, or you might choose. not to say certain things
Mhm.
out of fear of
Mhm.
appearing to be impacted or affected,
Mhm.
right? Like you might go and close the bathroom door
Mhm.
and cry your
Mhm.
eyes out, but you're not going to see me cry. You're not going to see me
Mhm.
change my emotions. I'm not going to
Mhm.
cuss back at you. I'm not going to change my tone like you're changing yours toward me. I'm going to be even, but you're
Mhm.
sucking all of that in.
So it's kind of like having your reactions in private. Like you won't show the reaction.
If you even get the opportunity to do it, right? Because you have an experience happen and
Right.
you have to keep
Mhm.
going, right? You're driving
Mhm.
home and the next
Mhm.
thing you're facing is traffic. So I can't even process
Mhm.
what just happened because now I'm processing something else. And now I have to
Mhm.
go home and be a
Mhm.
mom and a wife. And now it's time to go to bed and start all over again the next day.
Mhm.
So it
Mhm.
just compounds.
So do you feel like that compounding was a way to just kind of keep packing it all in, suppressing it one encounter and one experience after another, even if they were
I
micro
do think so.
experiences?
And I think so because as
Mhm.
women, we take on a lot just because we care, right? So you're not just dealing with what you're
Mhm.
dealing with
Mhm.
in that male dominated space, but you're also talking to your girlfriends about their problems. You're dealing with the things you deal with at home. If there are any stressors at home, whether it's financial or relationship or whatever, you're carrying that as well. And you kind of just do it. Depending on how you were conditioned, you just keep pushing because we watched our moms keep pushing and they saw their moms keep pushing
Mhm.
and working
Mhm.
through tough situations, and no one's talking.
Mhm.
Nobody is saying, no one's crying for
Mhm.
help because, in a way, you're afraid to look weak. That vulnerability,
Mhm.
even as a
Mhm.
female amongst other females, that vulnerability is not always welcome or accepted. Yeah.
Right. Or accepted.
You just carry it.
Yeah. So it's not welcome, it's not accepted. In this male dominated space, were there other factors that you were also facing simultaneously that kind of kept you feeling small or on edge?
I am also African American, and that is a whole nother way to experience things. With me being
Mhm.
in different levels of management, I was one of the only Black faces. So
Mhm.
not only am I one of the only females,
Mhm.
but I'm also
Mhm.
one of the only Black faces. And in the
Mhm.
role that I was in at the
Mhm.
time, I was having
Mhm.
to work on site with the customer as well. And in their space, they
Mhm.
definitely
Mhm.
didn't have people of color in leadership roles, much less women of color. We do
Mhm.
these things called quarterly business reviews. And literally, as the conference room fills up, you just hope that somebody else that looks like you will walk in and you're the only one. And all eyes are on
Mm.
you because you're
Mm.
the one responsible for also reporting,
Mhm.
the last quarter
Mm.
status.
Mhm.
So
So those were all other compounding factors that you had to deal with.
I'll give you a specific story. I think it would help if I can give you a story.
Yeah, go ahead.
So there was a period of time I was transitioning from being operations manager. It was very stressful. It was enjoyable in terms of being able to glean into people, and they enjoyed having me as a manager. They're like, "You treat us like a human being. You actually care."
Mhm. Mhm.
But that was a fun time. But the stress of having to cover all the different shifts and things like that, and still be a mom. My son was, I think, 4 at the time.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
just was. It was getting stressful, and so the opportunity to do a role that was, it was a management role, but it was less responsibility. I wasn't going to be managing people. I'd be managing an account. So in your mind, you're like, oh, okay, easy. My strong suit is customer service. Let's go do this. But
Mhm.
you don't think about the fact that you will be having to deal with personalities that don't necessarily align with, if you had to choose, you wouldn't choose to work with these people. In the beginning with the client, it was great. You come in, you make all the good first impressions, and everything's good until the one day where you have to tell them no.
Mm.
And I could do it because I knew my stuff. So when the company would back me, that just, oh, grated his nerves. And that was the beginning of basically a year's worth of downward spiral of that
Mhm.
dynamic. And, in lots of instances where things, in the role that I was in, you are the face or the liaison of the company to the customer.
Mhm.
And so you
Mhm.
have to be the person to be the bearer of good news, but the bearer of bad news as well.
Mhm.
And, a lot of times in
Mhm.
operations, it's a lot more bad news than there is good news.
Mhm. Mhm.
you can you carry that burden of I'm sorry, we messed up, and then you also carry the burden of having to hear the complaints and the disdain and all of that. And
Right.
that can be very difficult. But
Mhm.
as females, we'll take all that stuff in sometimes
Mhm.
because even though we don't say it, there's still that whole be seen and not heard kind of a thing. And
Mhm.
if we're assertive, we might come off as the B word, right?
Right.
And then add to it, I'm African American, so she has an attitude, all of that. When really
Right.
you're
Mhm.
trying to protect your image and try to not, fulfill stereotypes and things like that. That's a
Mhm.
lot of weight to carry.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I carried that weight for years to a point where those interactions, a lot of those negative interactions had me at a point where I felt very beat down. And even with years of experience, you would say, oh, why don't you just get another job? But I didn't
Mm.
even feel like I was worth it anymore. Like I was
Mm.
so beat down by those experiences
Right.
that I didn't know that I had anything to offer to anybody else.
So basically, your inner critic was in full force here. If you're telling yourself
Yeah.
that you didn't even believe that you could work anywhere else, did you say that you didn't feel worthy to be hired anywhere else? Did you say that at
That's
some
what I
point?
said. Yeah, I
Yeah.
did just now. Yeah,
Okay.
you don't
So
feel worthy.
okay, if that's what you're thinking, I'm not hireable. Like no one's going to be able to take me on. Wow,
Mhm.
that inner critic must have been so loud.
It was. It was very loud, and it kept
Mm-hmm.
me from speaking up for myself. It kept
Mm-hmm.
me from making the changes I needed to make in terms of
Mm-hmm.
like the natural thing anybody else would do. Men take risk, right? They're willing. They're at the drop of a dime. That's another reason why they could be a little bit more promotable because they're willing to take that risk of whether they qualify or not applying for a job. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
we will wait to see, well, do I have all the things I need on my resume first? Like
Like
before we go
cross-checking
on
and double,
yeah,
triple checking and
right,
quadruple
right.
checking and then
You know,
getting reassurance and looking at your checklist and
right, right,
perfecting it. You needed to perfect the
right.
process.
Mhm.
Mm,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So tell me a little bit about with this particular scenario and this client, this customer that you had. It sounds like all the stress and the burdens of everything that you had to carry from
Mhm.
the demands of the role, but even the disdain and the complaints and bearing that weight of having to liaison that all of the good stuff and the bad stuff and the
Mhm.
bad news was always outweighing the good news. And just, if
Yeah,
you were assertive, then, now you're seen as someone who has a really bad attitude or all the
right.
other racial stereotypes and any other stereotype
Uh-huh.
as a woman and all kinds of stuff. You were carrying a lot on your shoulders. So how did that manifest further into some of the things that you'd started to introduce about, how things showed up for you, how it manifested?
That manifested in my body and my voice. Like I said, I did not speak up for myself
Mm,
like I
mhm.
probably should have. I
Yeah.
complained about it in a way. Like there was the one time where I did complain to our HR department
Mhm.
at our
Mhm.
company, but it's very hard when you're dealing with a customer. They don't have to go by the bylaws and everything of your organization, right? That you
Mhm.
work for. They do have their own for their company, but you have to have some extreme evidence, right? That they've done something. So that kind of made me feel like, what's the point of saying anything? So I never said anything. I
Mm,
just would keep showing up every day, keep doing what I could do until
mhm.
one day I stood up in the office just to go talk to him. And my lower back, it hurt so bad I couldn't stand up straight.
Mhm.
That turned into having a hard time walking, getting
Mhm.
in and out of my car. When you sit down,
Mm,
your back still hurts. When you lay down to go to sleep, your back still
mhm.
hurts.
Mhm.
And that stayed. I actually had to get physical therapy and it still wasn't going away.
Mhm.
What ended up happening was another account within our company presented itself. And also, he definitely did not appreciate that I would stand up for myself in terms of, I would stand up for the company, not necessarily
Mhm.
for myself, but I would stand up
Mhm.
for the things of the company.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
things were going wrong operationally, though, that were kind of outside of my control.
Mhm.
And of course, in those situations, you're managing perception.
Mhm.
And his perception, of course, is not that the six locations being managed by other people are all this one person who's in a whole other state's fault that it's not
Mhm.
working. And
Mhm.
so, because that became his perception of me, I assume he wanted to have that role change. And they
Mhm.
brought in a man, of course, a man
Mhm.
that was
Mhm.
not of color to
Okay.
take the role. And I was training him on the ins and outs of the account. I didn't know that I was training him to be my replacement.
Wow.
Yeah, and one day he slipped up and said it, which honestly, I wasn't surprised because I am a spiritual person and
Mhm.
I had an inkling that something was going on
Something was
just
off.
from my
Yeah.
for my
Mhm.
intuition,
Mhm.
and I was not against it though. I was like, please, if this is what's going to
Please
happen, by all means,
take
let it
it.
happen. Take it away, you know?
Right.
Yeah,
But it's just the whole, like, secrecy of how they went about it, right? You're now training the person, giving them everything that you know for them to
right.
just take it away, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
and you're not having a say.
And I have no say in it, right? And even he didn't
Right.
realize that that's what was going on. He
Mm,
thought
mhm.
that he was just coming to kind of like be aware as a backup, but he didn't know he was going to be the full replacement because he didn't
Right.
want it. He was like, I do not want this because he knew what
Mm,
it was like to work with a client. Uh,
right.
but
Yeah.
all that said, the day came where I no longer had to be responsible for dealing with the client, and the pain went
Mhm.
away in that moment.
Mhm.
When I found out I wasn't
Wow.
going to have to deal with them anymore, it went away.
So how did you end up making that connection? Did you realize right away?
I didn't realize right away. No, I didn't. I thought because I wasn't in tune with things like that yet, I thought that maybe, maybe I need to change my chair at the office or something like that.
You're
Like I
still
didn't
thinking of
know.
it like logistics of the way your room is set up or how your desk is set up.
I thought it was that. And what did happen around that same time was I started taking a course.
Mhm.
And in that course, it dealt with things related to mindset and how stress can show up and things like that. And
Mhm.
so months later, I made the connection and I was just like,
Mhm.
wow, I had no idea. You just don't know what you're carrying around. Like
Mhm.
you never put two and two together. You
Yeah.
hear people stress eating, right? And
Yeah.
that manifests itself in weight gain and stuff like that. But
Mhm.
you don't realize that you can also carry stress and create disease in your body, create pain that has no reason to be there.
Mm. Yeah, and I'm curious, like when you went for physio and stuff, could they figure out what had happened? Or were they just treating your symptoms or were they sitting there scratching their heads going, "Huh, I don't know how this happened to you."
She couldn't figure out why. She recommended me to a physical therapist just because she hoped that that would fix it. But when I came back for a follow up, she said, I wonder if it was stress related because when it went away. And I said, I don't know. I mean, that just doesn't make sense. But once I took the course and I remember what she said and what they were saying in the course, and I was like, oh, maybe she was
Mm.
right.
This is maybe what the doctor meant.
Yeah, this is maybe what she meant. Because of course you say to yourself, I'm stressed out, but like it's not anything like that. But
But then we downgrade, right? So sometimes there's this idea that individuals they downgrade when they're experiencing the stress. They're like, "Oh, well,
right.
it's not that bad," or it's stress. Like we're supposed to have stress, right? Like it's work. It's work. Isn't that what happens? So we kind of simplify how
Hmm.
intense the experience actually is.
Right. And you think
Mm,
things like, it could be worse. People deal with worse. This can't
right.
possibly be,
Oh,
and
yeah.
so you downplay exactly the thing
Mhm,
that is the worst for you. Everybody's worst is relative, right?
mhm,
You know.
mhm. Yeah, everybody's worst is relative. But it's not about comparing your worst to someone else's worst
Right.
either. It's about
Right.
trying to figure out how to navigate through a sticky situation.
Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
sticky situations are going to look different for different people, but we never know
Exactly.
from the outside in what else is part of that person's issues and scenarios. And likewise, people can't see all of the parts that are comprehensive in what's going on in
Hmm.
our worlds, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's really hard to put that comparison in place to think that it's actually accurate.
Right. Right.
Mhm. Mhm.
And again, when you're not necessarily taught
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
mental health can manifest itself in
Mhm.
your physical body, and you're
Mhm.
not taught that at work, yes, you can be stressed out, but like honestly, interactions with people can trigger things from your childhood. Like I
Mhm.
realized in working with him, there were things that he triggered for me. Obviously, it was all after the fact, but you
Mhm.
realize like so many things are connected, and it is
Mhm.
important that
Mhm.
you address your mental
Yeah.
beauty, as you call it. But yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And what you've experienced and what you expressed and described today in your story so far, you were about to stand up, go into this private office to speak up, and right there, that pain didn't even allow
Mhm.
you to stand up straight. And
Mhm.
then after that, you couldn't walk or sit or stand or lie down without pain, right? It was
Mhm.
it was constantly with you, and
Mhm.
it impacted you while you drove or did any other
Mhm.
activity. And then the account was taken away and the pain went away, right? So
Yeah.
the account being taken away was a blessing in disguise. And this
And
entire
mhm.
process that you described in the mental health world and in the clinical world, we coined that term psychosomatic response.
Oh, okay.
So a psychosomatic response, it's like a condition that involves the occurrence of a physical symptom that usually
Mhm.
lacks a medical explanation.
Right. Yeah. Mhm.
It's the emotional state that we're in.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so sometimes people's blood pressure or respiratory conditions could be triggered from something that has nothing to do with the physical part of the ailment, right?
Mhm.
So what you were describing today is seen as a psychosomatic response. It's a stress response, right? And it manifests in the body. So just to give context to what you were describing, there's actually a word for it. It's actually a
Right.
thing.
That's so interesting.
Like if anyone was to say, "Well, it's just in my head," then no, it's an actual thing. It's a real thing.
That is so interesting. And I believe it. You know how you can sometimes think of things from a spiritual perspective or a metaphysical perspective, but to know that there's actually a real science behind it. That's good to know. That's
Hmm.
good to
Hmm.
know. And that's that whole thing, listen to your body. Although for me, it's just, I
Yeah.
did not make the association until after the fact.
Well, yeah, because you didn't have that knowledge, right? But you have it now. So
Hmm.
I'm certain, even though you and I haven't talked about this, but I'm certain that now when you have any body pain or a headache or something, whether you realize it or not, there must be a part of your, subconscious mind that's going, "Oh, where's this coming from?
Yeah. Yeah.
What kind of stress am I facing right now? What pressure am I under? Is there anything that I need to do differently?" There's probably a part of you that is now checking in with yourself a little differently.
That is true. That's absolutely true. Now
Hmm.
I do that, and
Yeah.
especially after that, because I still worked there
Hmm.
and the same type of stress was presenting itself, just not with that individual. Even though I got a new account, you still deal with some of the similar concerns, but what
Hmm.
I learned was to listen to my body, to
Mm.
not internalize everything, to make sure that
Mhm.
I express how I feel and to speak up for myself. Like if
Mhm.
you can be the customer, but
Mhm.
the customer's not always right, and there's a tactful way to
Mhm.
say
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
And, just look out for yourself.
Mhm.
Nobody is worth your health.
Mhm.
And God knows if something happened to you at work because of what was going on there, they will replace you just like your number.
Yeah, they'll be like, "Oh, this person might not be fit to work here. They've got a condition." I mean,
Hmm.
there are labor laws and all of that, but they vary from country to state
Yeah.
to region. And regardless, those are things that happen sometimes, and it
Uh-huh.
shouldn't happen, right? But they do sometimes happen,
Hmm.
and sometimes more than we lead ourselves to believe, right? And sometimes the employers themselves, they don't really realize that that's why
They don't
they're doing
recognize
it.
mental health.
Well, so I think that we're doing better now, right? So I think in 2022, we're doing better with it.
Right. I think COVID kind of brought that to the
Yes,
light. Like,
exactly.
companies have more offerings as it relates to services for
Yes,
mental health. But I
yeah.
think there's still
Well, we're a ways away still.
there's still work to be done, but we're
Yes,
definitely
yes,
further along than we were when my back was hurting.
yes,
When
exactly.
my back was hurting, we were nowhere near there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's a crack in, there's like an opening and people are peering in and peeking in and not really sure what to do
Mhm.
with it. So that's why when people say, things in the workplace are changing, but I'm not sure how effective they are. And I say, well, give them a chance. If
Mhm.
if someone's been conditioned to do something for so long,
It's going to take a while to change. It's a culture.
yeah, just think about in a physical sense, your posture. If you've been sitting with your shoulders curled forward for so long, it actually feels more natural to sit that way. But if you correct your shoulders, it feels weird. So you have to be intentional about it and strategic on how to keep your shoulders from curling forward. And then when you're not too sure, it's going to curl forward. So you have to continue to be intentional and go, so how else do I keep my shoulders straight? Right?
That's a really perfect example. And you're making me, I'm sitting up straight as we speak.
Yeah.
But yes,
But
like I just
that's
straighten my
it.
posture, but that's a
Right?
really good
But that's it, right? So
metaphor.
we have a
Yeah.
crack in. People are trying. Let's give organizations and places and workplaces the benefit of the doubt that there are a lot of people who still might be limited in their awareness, but they are trying. The intention
Yeah.
is right. Now, to facilitate and finesse all of that and really get to the root and the core, yes, it's going to take time. But if we're allowing ourselves to at least look at it differently, that is a step that we need to acknowledge and honor as well.
You're right. And I think the work that you're doing, like with this podcast, is going to help with that type of awareness, in my opinion. Just helping
Mm-hmm.
people to understand how important mental health is. And,
Mm-hmm.
you never know what executive or person in power is listening. And something that me or one of your other guests says will make a light bulb go off and they realize, hey, there's more that we can do. So the work
Right.
you're doing is good work.
Thank you. But more than that, it's like the stories get out there. People can relate and go,
Hmm.
oh, I've been going through that too. This
Hmm.
person's gone
Yeah.
through this. Oh, okay. So I'm not alone, right? We're humans. So we're wired for human connection. Even if you're an
Yeah.
introvert, there's still this thing about, being connected. So if you're feeling so isolated and alone because you feel no one gets what you're going through.
You just sparked something for me with that. I
Mm-hmm.
think with me being an introvert, that was also part of the problem of why I didn't speak up. I'm not a talker
Mm-hmm.
anyway,
Mm-hmm.
unless you talk to me first, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
definitely not volunteering how I feel. I volunteer how I can help.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
volunteer if you need something, but I don't necessarily volunteer to say, hey, raise my hand. I need help over here. I
Right.
try to find my own solutions.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you don't ask for help, you will suffer. It can
Yeah.
create suffering.
Like it's okay to be independent, but it's also okay to reach out for help. And it's not
Hmm.
okay to retreat in such a way where you don't feel like you can.
Because it becomes a habit.
Yes. Right. So that's
Hmm.
something new that gets conditioned.
Hmm.
So really interesting. So let me ask you, Shirley, when people come to see me in the therapy space, when they come and talk with me about whatever it is that we're about to embark on in a journey for, they're typically in one of three places. Some people are getting started where they've not done therapy before, or they've never touched this particular issue before. They're like, I'm ready to start. I need some help. And then there's people who are actually actively in the thick of something and they really need help to navigate the sticky, stuck points. And, things are a big mess and they're in all these foggy ways and they're trying to get some clarity and find a path that makes sense for them. And some people are looking back and they're looking back maybe because they need closure on some things in their life or they've unpacked so many things that they now are trying to make connections or they're trying to close a chapter in their life so they can move forward, right?
Hmm.
So what part of the journey would you say that you're in? Would you say that you're getting started, or are you in the middle, or are you looking back?
I think I'm somewhere in between middle and looking back.
So like you're in an in between. You're in an in
I'm
between
in
state.
between. I say that because, in terms of being beyond like the first phase that you spoke
Mm-hmm.
of, shortly after this happened,
Mm-hmm.
I met a therapist in Canada who was running a program called Slayer and a Critic. It's a group coaching.
Mm.
And in that process, I uncovered a lot of things that created the not so worthy, not using her voice, scary person that was overstressed out, overworked, high
Mm-hmm.
achiever
Mm-hmm.
that I was at the time. Some of it was from childhood things I experienced,
Mm-hmm.
and some of it was because I didn't know. They don't teach you things, like I said earlier, about
Mm-hmm.
how important it is to be self aware, how important it is to do things to test and grow your confidence, how important it is to acknowledge your accomplishments, how
Mm-hmm.
important it is to use gratitude, just all the different
Mm-hmm.
things from a mental health perspective and self development
Mm-hmm.
perspective that could have made encountering that scenario even easier. We did this one thing that was really valuable. Well, two things. We were doing the affirmations, and one of the affirmations we had to say out loud before the end of the session was, I am courageous.
Mm,
And as I was saying it, I just cried. Like I could barely get it out.
mm,
But I was like, I am courageous. And I'm like, I am
mhm,
courageous. I have endured a lot of different things in my life that I did
mhm,
not give myself credit for. And I buried, honestly.
mm,
I think when
mm,
we overachieve sometimes, we're
mhm,
running away from our past. And
mhm,
I had worked my way up a lot in that company, achieved a lot in the company,
mhm.
but I had not addressed anything.
So while you worked up that ladder, that corporate ladder, you might have
Mhm.
been climbing high there and running from something else. And it
Right,
sounds like what
exactly.
you're telling me is that there's more to your story that you were able to connect with the more you
Hmm.
grew your own self awareness. And
Yes.
it
Hmm.
sounds like that helped you see, like, oh, there's more to my journey here than
Yeah,
I realized. Like, okay, so there's some
right.
parts to tackle. Like I can chunk this into
Mhm.
smaller parts now. I kind of get what all these parts are. And so now I can actually work on them. I have insight now. I have perspective. I have some new things to consider, some new
Mhm.
old things to consider, right? I've got
Yeah,
some root things to kind of connect to.
exactly. Root. It's like you suppress things, and that kind of adds to that buildup as well. Of one of my coach friends says knapsack. You know, you're just
Hmm.
kind of like carrying all this stuff in a
Mm,
backpack, and I was
hmm.
able to start the process of unpacking some of those
Hmm.
things and addressing them. And
Hmm.
one other thing that was very valuable, your listeners probably have heard of this, the DISC assessment. And what was so valuable about that, though, was that it helped me understand the type of personality that I am. I'm an S and C or a CNS. And one of the things that I used to get told all the time in the workspace was you give too much information and you're defensive. And so that I didn't know how to work with that. I didn't know what
Hmm.
that meant. I
Hmm.
took it as an insult or criticism. And I realized in learning about my personality type that it's not that I'm defensive. It's not that I say too much.
Hmm.
I care about giving a lot of details because I want you to be informed. I want you to have everything you need so you can make a good decision.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
for, say, a D personality, they don't want all of that. Just they want bullet
Hmm.
points. So it helped me learn
Right.
how to maneuver that male dominated space better
Right.
because most of the guys were D's. But for those guys, like in accounting and stuff like that, who like all the details,
Hmm.
you can give them more than if you're dealing with one of the other guys who doesn't want to hear all that. Just
Right.
stick to the facts. And
Right.
you're no longer shrinking.
No. Now you're making a creative, conscious decision. Like, so
Right,
here I'm going to give them the skinny, here I'm going to give the detail.
right,
This person can handle this part of me. This person I need to
right.
adapt differently because it's all about being
Yes,
effective, right?
right,
And so you
right.
were able to learn all these things about yourself.
And don't take everything personal.
And I don't need to take it personally. Exactly.
And it helped me to understand that
Yes.
guy, the the jerk
Yeah.
guy. I
Yeah.
realized like
Yeah.
he was dealing with things too. And no, it doesn't
Hmm.
excuse his
No.
behavior. But a
Yeah.
lot of times when people are that way, they're going through a lot on their own or have dealt with
Hmm.
a lot on their own. They face pressures.
Right.
His role, he faces
Hmm.
pressure in his role, just like I face pressure in mine. It's just
Hmm.
how I'm more courteous about how I manage my
Hmm.
pressure.
Hmm.
He's not so
Hmm.
much, and it
Hmm.
doesn't excuse it. But if you
Hmm.
know that kind of stuff, you are not shrinking. You're being more effective, but you're not taking so much personal and you're
Hmm.
not questioning your worth and your capabilities anymore.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a lot there. But I'm so glad that you're able to share all these fine details because that's what really gets us to really understand the things that were going on and all the different perspective that you can bring into it from
Mhm.
doing your reflections and doing your work and looking in
Mhm.
hindsight and getting a fuller picture. And
Mhm.
I'm curious. I mean, you've shared some parts already just as we've organically been speaking, but I'm still curious. So the question here is, how has your untold story affected your mental health? I know you've talked to me about the physical manifestations and the pain that you had in your back, and you've talked about, oh, that loud inner critic, right?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I'm curious about what kind of emotions do you recall experiencing? Did your thoughts ever get so bad that your thoughts became dark? Did you experience anything like
Yeah,
that? Tell me if you feel comfortable.
that's fine. At that particular time, I had things going on in my personal life as well. So it was between
Mhm.
that and the work experiences, which personal life, you can manage that. You can manage changing your
Mhm.
personal life. At least I can pretty easily.
Mhm.
But there's something weird that happens where you're like 38 going on 39. You start looking at like, I haven't accomplished anything, even though I had, but like, you're like, I
Mhm.
haven't accomplished anything. Like dealing with that scenario at work made everything else look worse than what it really was. In that space, I'm like, I haven't done anything I wanted to do. I don't feel like I have any purpose. You start questioning if you're a good mom anymore,
Mhm.
just all the
Mhm.
things. Like my inner critic was so loud.
It just kept getting louder. You became an imposter of your own thoughts.
Right. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to be here anymore. Like it was that
Mhm.
bad for a while.
Mhm.
And I've
Mhm.
never been that way. I know that things can get dark for people, but I tell
Mhm.
people all the time there's always hope. And I was raised with that faith and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
that's how dark it was. I wasn't even using any of my spiritual
Mhm.
resources. Like I was low. I wouldn't go out for opportunity. I didn't even know what made me happy anymore.
Mhm. Mhm.
It was a lot of things
Mhm.
happening all at once. And the work thing kicked it off,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, it was like like a straw that broke the camel's back, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. So so what's your key message to the listeners of our show? What do you want them to know?
I have 5 things that really are important to me that I want people, especially women, to know. One of them, I really highly value authenticity. I know we said that earlier,
Mhm.
but it matters to me so much. Part of being authentic is you have to know yourself first, right? To even
Mhm.
know how to show up. I didn't know myself very well at that time.
Mhm.
I don't think I was fully operating as myself. I think we are really good at, like I told you, that whole overachieving thing. I was doing what I had to do to excel in
Mhm.
a male dominated space. And I was doing it just because obviously money is one thing, but also because you can tend to attach your identity to titles and accomplishments,
Mhm.
especially when you don't know who you are. And
Mhm.
I think that's what created that trigger for me that day where I was like,
Mhm.
I don't even, on paper, everything looks good. But in my heart, I didn't feel like I had done anything with my life because I was just doing something that looked good on paper. I wanted to
Mhm.
look good on paper, but who I was not that. And now I'm very big on just understanding more about what is my purpose? Who am I?
Mhm.
What do I love? What do I like to do? What are my core values?
Mhm.
If I volunteer to do anything or if I take on a role, does this
Mhm.
match Shirley in her
Mhm.
core?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
if I make friends, I mean, it's a big deal.
Mm.
Authenticity is huge.
Right.
The other thing is knowing your worth. Knowing your worth is so important because if you don't know your value, number one, you can't communicate it and you can't expect anybody to treat you how you won't treat yourself. You cannot expect anybody to, this is one of the things I used to always expect. Like, I am working so hard. Can't you see how hard I'm working? Promote
Mhm.
me. Like, no, you
Mhm.
have to speak up for yourself and confidently speak up for yourself and acknowledge your greatness and in a humble way, in an
Mhm.
assertive way, make sure that if you are trying to move along, whether it's in business or career, if you want something, go after it, confidently go after it, and know your worth.
Mhm.
And remind
Mhm.
yourself daily of the good things that you do. And be open to critique as well, because I think part of knowing your worth is acknowledging your greatness, but also
Mhm.
being open to the fact that I'm human, I make mistakes. So go ahead and critique me so I can be better. I feel it's important to use your voice, like we already talked about. Don't shrink yourself. If you feel like you're not getting what you want, it's probably because you haven't said anything. Nobody can know what you need. Nobody
Mhm.
can know how to respect you and all of
Mhm.
those good things if you don't
Mhm.
speak up and use your voice. Don't listen to your inner critic.
Mhm.
Actually, you know what you can do with your inner critic? Hear what it's saying to you and then separate fact from fiction. Is this actually true?
Mm.
If it's not true, throw it out.
Mhm.
And finally, do it scared. Be courageous. Courageous doesn't always mean you're not afraid. It just means that you're willing to take action and take risk, knowing that the worst case scenario, if it doesn't
Mhm.
go as planned, at least I learned a lesson. But if it goes as planned, great. But what
Yeah.
I can say in any of it is I did try. If we're telling my retirement story or we're doing my eulogy, you're not going to be able to say she didn't try.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
She didn't go for what she thought was important.
Yeah.
So those are my things.
Those are great messages. Those are great things. Amazing. Here's the question for you. What was that game-changing inspiration? Do you have something that was a game-changing inspiration that kind of reflects the pivoting point in your untold story? Like, I guess what I mean is there like a quote, a mantra, a place, a person, a book that really spoke to you? What would that have been?
Lots of people, lots of books, lots of things.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
I have a favorite thought leader. His name is Neville Goddard.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we do sometimes is we make ourselves a victim of the situation we're in. We don't
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge the fact that we are co creators of our destiny.
Mm.
And this quote that stood out for me was, "You are already that which you want to be, and your refusal to believe this is the only reason you do not see it."
Mm. Say it one more time. It's so thought-provoking.
You are already that which you want to be, and your refusal to believe this is the only reason you do not see it.
Mm. How deep
It's
is
our
that?
belief in ourselves that gets in our own way.
Mm.
And we are the only people that can save ourselves. It's
Mm.
not going to come from outside, it's going to come from within. And if you want anything about your life to be different,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be the one to make the changes, one day at a
Right.
time, one step at a time, to make it
Mm-hmm.
be what you want it to be.
Exactly. Wow. Okay. And so who are we giving a shout out to today? Which cause or organization has been so impactful to you on your journey? Who are we shouting out to?
I keep mentioning Slayer and a critic, but I promise you it's been a big, big, big thing for me. So
Mm-hmm.
there is a coach in Canada, a coach and therapist in Canada named Jennifer Slay.
Mm-hmm.
And she's my mentor and a big influence, big, big, big
Mm-hmm.
positive influence in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely would say if I had to shout somebody or something out, it would be her.
Okay. And Slay Your Inner Critic, the group coaching program.
Yes.
That's hers. Amazing. All right. How can people connect with you if they would like to? We can get all of the handles from you, but if you could just give us a list of where you're findable.
I am findable on Instagram. Just you can look for my name. You can also
Mm-hmm.
look for Manifesting Excellence coaching as well. Shirley L.A. Brooks is the other one on Instagram. In terms of websites, I know you'll give them links, but manifestyourexcellence.com is one link, and shirleylabrooks.co is my direct website link as well.
Mm-hmm.
That is where I am.
Amazing. All right. Well, we'll grab the details from you and add that to the show notes page so people can reach out to you directly if they would like to. And yeah, so guess what, Shirley?
We made it.
Yeah, you just dared yourself to share. Congratulations.
Oh, look at that. Awesome.
hmm Shirley, I just want to convey how important it was to have heard you tell this part of your story and journey through finding your personal path and your career passions. And as you conquered your way through excelling in a male dominated field, understanding how it can impact your mental well-being and how it manifests physically when you keep it suppressed. And this story has been incredibly encouraging to hear and witness for myself. So thank you for the deep conversation and for all your daring and all the sharing. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I just appreciate the opportunity to actually share my story.
I love it. And once again, Shirley, thank you for being part of Dare to Share Your Untold Story and helping to be a voice in breaking down the barriers of mental stigma. To all of our listeners, if you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and you want to be part of breaking down barriers of mental stigma, I invite you to go wherever you are listening to the episode and hit subscribe. Leave us a comment or a review of the episode and maybe how you relate to it. To learn more about what we offer, visit www.daretoheal.co. And if you are feeling ready and brave to share, please submit your story by visiting www.daretoshare.co. Thanks for joining in.